Welcome, friends. So today I wanted to talk about AKs. Why, you ask? Well, because AKs are fun to talk about. But more specifically, Guerillas in the Mist, which is a really great AK-centric YouTube channel, recently put out a video which was an AK buyer's guide. Really great video, you should go check it out. But in that video they discuss an AK that I have, specifically the 5.56 NATO AK, or the Polish Beryl. Now, in the video, they talk about this gun a little bit, and I wanted to talk about it a little more just to kind of clarify some things about it. I think there's some misconceptions about the Beryl, specifically when it comes to upgrading the Beryl. So I just want to talk about how I upgraded this Beryl, what I did to it, and also kind of my overall general experience with the gun. I haven't had a whole lot of time with the gun, so this is not a review. This is just kind of my impressions and my experience with it so far. So today, let's talk about the Polish Beryl. So what exactly is the Polish Beryl? Well, without going into too much detail on the history, the Polish Beryl was the Polish service weapon during the Iraq War, and it was born out of the Tantal program. The Polish Tantal was the Poles' attempt to create a 5.45 AK pattern rifle, since they did not get the AK-74 specifications from the Soviet Union. But once the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact by extension collapsed, they needed a weapon that could give them interoperability with NATO, because they wanted to join NATO, and this weapon is the result of those efforts. An AK pattern rifle chambered in 5.56 that actually saw real combat in the Iraq War. So, as you can see though, this weapon does not look like the Polish service weapon, because I have done a lot of upgrades to this gun that kind of take it out of its stock configuration or its upgraded military configuration. And that's really what I wanted to talk about today, because there's a lot of talk on the internet about how proprietary the Beryl is and how hard it is to upgrade. And so I wanted to kind of dispel some of that and just walk through what I did to this weapon. And if you wanted to set up your Beryl in a similar way, or if you just want to see kind of a cool rendition of a modernized AK, this is a video that you might enjoy. So what exactly have I done with the Beryl? Well, I'm going to start here with my optics setup, because this is actually where the only proprietary Beryl component is on this weapon, and that is this top rail you see here that bolts kind of into this tab back here and these notches in the rear sight block. This is, as I said, a proprietary optics rail for the Beryl. And the reason that is because when the Poles were creating the Tantal and then later the Beryl, they did not include a standard AKM side rail that you would typically see. And if you need an example of that or just want to see one, here is kind of a more bone stock standard looking AKM. And as you can see here on the side, here is that side rail where you can mount these optic mounts that'll kind of go over your dust cover right here. And so the Poles did not include that. And so when I was building out this weapon, I knew I wanted to mount optics on it, and this really seemed to be kind of the best solution for that. It is native to the Beryl. They are chronically out of stock, so if you really want one, you should sign up for the notification letter from Arms of America when they do come in stock. That's what I did. I was in an airport actually, saw the notification, and I immediately hit buy on my phone to ensure that I was able to get one. And this does provide a good optics mounting solution. Right here I have a Holosun 510C and a Holosun magnifier, and I have not had any issues with this holding zero. So overall, I really like it. It does have some quirks to it, and I'll come back to that in a minute. So what else have I done to the Beryl? Well, looking here at the back, I have a Veiltor AR buffer tube stock adapter with a Fab Defense stock here. And I actually really like this setup. You can fit AKM stocks onto a Beryl, but it typically takes a good bit of filing or dremeling to get it to fit. because of this tab here where the optics rail indexes with the back. So because of that, I wanted to look for something that was simple and required minimal effort to fit, and this stock adapter was perfect. No fitment required, it just fits directly into the back of the receiver, and then you can put a stock on it and you are good to go. And I really like this stock. I think it's worked very well. Moving on to the front of the weapon, I have a Crook handguard. Now, this is a Ukrainian company, and they make a lot of really great accessories. I have their stock on another AK. I also have their side rail optic mount as well. So I really like what Crook does. I think they make really great stuff. As for this handguard, though, this is a standard AKM handguard. Now, it did require some fitting to go into the Beryl, and the reason for that is the Beryl has a unique handguard retainer. So it has these two sling loops on it, as opposed to the standard AKM handguard retainer, which only has this one sling loop on this side. And so because of that, the handguard, as I mentioned, did require some fitting for it to go on, but it was pretty painless. I maybe had to do like 20-ish minutes of filing, and I was going pretty slow. I had just a file set, no Dremel, because I was trying to go as slow as possible to avoid taking off too much material. And then I had to take a hammer and then beat this handguard retainer into place. But once I got it to lock up, my goodness, there is no movement in this at all. I would be very confident mounting a laser to this, and I think it would hold zero. I haven't tested that, so take that with a grain of salt. But I do think that it would work phenomenally well because this lockup is great. One other thing to note about handguards, though, is that while I would say most AKM lower handguards will fit, the upper handguard is a little bit of a different story. The Beryl gas tube is a little different than a standard AK gas tube. Let me pull out my AKM example here. As you can see on this one, most AK upper handguards index directly onto the gas tube from these kind of rings here, and then you rotate the handguard around and then it indexes with the gas tube. The Beryl gas tube is actually just freely floating there. It's not attaching to anything. And so this upper handguard, the reason that it's able to sit here just fine is because it actually bolts directly into this lower handguard piece here. You would see a similar design on, say, a Zenico handguard or a Barwaris style handguard. Those kinds of handguards where the upper handguard indexes or bolts into the lower handguard, those will work just fine with the Beryl. But if you had maybe a more standard style AKM pattern handguard, it would probably not fit up here on the top. I think you might be able to get some adapters, but I haven't looked into that. Bottom line, there is compatibility, especially with the lower handguard, with the Beryl, with AKM spec stuff, but do check what you're looking into before you go out and buy it and it doesn't fit. One final note I will make about something I put on here is this grip. This is a Magpul grip. This is a standard AKM style AK grip, and it went on here just fine, no issues. So some final thoughts on the Beryl, kind of my experience with it so far. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, I don't have that many rounds on this thing. I'm probably floating it around somewhere around 300-ish, and that's nothing for an AK pattern rifle, or really any rifle worth owning. So what's been my experience so far? How do I feel about it? Do I recommend this? Well, if you are looking for a 5.56 AK, I think that you would be very hard-pressed to find one better than this one, given its reputation, its legacy, and I would say the minimal amount of issues that you could have with it. That doesn't mean it's perfect, and I'll kind of talk about that here a little bit, but I will say that if you're looking for a 5.56 AK, it would be hard to do better than this. Now, that doesn't mean that it's free of issues, and I'll talk about that. So I mentioned earlier that this optics rail has some issues with it. So the first and most obvious one is that this optics rail makes the height over bore extremely high, which is why I actually wanted to go with this adjustable cheek piece on the stock so that I could get a good cheek weld. If you are using the polymer stock that comes with this weapon, you might be getting like a chin weld, if anything. It's pretty bad, especially if you're running any sort of optic that sits a little high. So that is why I think having some sort of adjustable cheek piece or whatever is really necessary if you want to do some serious use with this weapon. Another issue that this rail brings in is, while it is a very stable, very good at retaining zero system, it is bolted on top of your dust cover. And so if you want to take the weapon apart and clean it, you need to then disassemble your optics setup, which of course is going to shift your zero. Even if it's negligible, it will result in some zero shift, more than likely. And that can be annoying, especially if you want to clean the innards of the gun. Of course, yes, it's an AK, you don't need to clean it that often, blah, blah, blah. But you really do want to clean the gun to keep it in good order, especially with the Beryl. So one negative point I have seen about the Beryl online is that the firing pins in them can break. Now, I would say that issue is not very widespread. Most of the people online that you see talk about the Beryl will just sing its praises and say that there's nothing wrong with it. But of course it is the internet, and I have seen one or two Reddit posts about broken firing pins. And when I was cleaning the weapon at one point, noticed that when I was messing with the bolt, it's a free float firing pin, I noticed that the firing pin was getting slightly stuck. And if I shook it really hard, I could kind of dislodge it, but it would stick a little bit. So I took the firing pin out and cleaned it, and the issue went away. But that is something I think that is cause for a little bit of pause, perhaps, where it's like, okay, the firing pin's getting a little stiff, and of course you don't want that to happen. Again, it probably was a non-issue, but I have other 7.62 AKs, never seen anything like that. So that's just something to bear in mind, and I think you will find that more commonly with 5.56 AKs just because the specifications for them are not quite as robust or perhaps as widespread. There's not really one specification for a 5.56 AK, so you might run into certain issues with like firing pin channels more commonly than with a 7.62 gun. Again, probably not a big issue, but something to keep in mind. And again, this optics rail means that it's going to be more of a pain to clean your weapon as opposed to, say, an Ultimac, or if you have a Zenico style setup where the dust cover can fold, you can still access the guts of the gun. So that is another kind of negative of this optics rail. Moving into some other kind of things worth noting about the Beryl is that this is still a military factory AK. What do I mean by that? Well, it is extremely overgassed, which isn't that surprising, and it's really not that big a deal because, especially if you're used to like 7.62 AKs, this is a very soft shooting weapon, especially once you've kind of got your attachments on it and it weighs a little bit more, which is kind of another negative in its own right. Like, it can be kind of heavy, but it's an AK. AKs tend to be heavier, but it's still a pretty soft shooting gun and it feels really good to shoot. But it is worth noting that it is pretty overgassed. One other thing worth noting is that this front sight tower is very canted. So, it would make some of my, Wassers kind of blush because my Wassers look nice and straight. This one, very canted. You can't really see it over here, but I have shifted this front sight post like all the way to the left. Is that the end of the world? No, not at all, because I've got an optic setup on it, and by the time I was really like caring about that, I had already put a bunch of attachments on it, so I was like, I don't really want to send this into warranty because it's not really impacting the function of the gun, and I don't want to take this handguard off because it was a pain in the butt to hammer the handguard retainer into place. So, but that is worth noting. Basically, you are spending a good amount of money on this weapon, but don't expect a custom build like Meridian Defense Rifle Dynamics level of quality, you are still going to see some of those blemishes that you might see in a military factory, like canted front sights and overgassing. As for my overall experience shooting the weapon, again, not a high round count, but it is very, very pleasant to shoot. It is just a super fun gun to run, whether it's kind of more dynamic stuff, or you can take it out to distance as well. I actually recently took this out to longer distances, and I was able to engage steel kind of torso-sized targets out to 400 yards. And that was really cool and really, really fun. So again, if you are in the market for a 5.56 AK, I think this would be an excellent choice. And I will, of course, update you all on anything that happens in the future with it. But with all that being said, I hope I have shown you that it is possible to customize your Beryl, even if you're using more standard AKM parts. Oh, and one other thing worth mentioning before I go is mag compatibility. A lot of people on the internet will say, oh my gosh, with the Beryl, you have to use their proprietary Beryl mags. And this is not true. These are Bulgarian polymer mags that you can get on Gun Mag Warehouse for like 12 bucks, maybe like 12 to 15 bucks. And these have run phenomenally well. As you've seen in some of the shooting footage I've posted in this video, I was shooting kind of outdoors at this like dustier kind of range, and I was dropping these in the dirt, and dirt was getting into them, and things were still feeding. I had no malfunctions with the gun, no issues with the mags. So highly recommend these. These are very affordable. You see that all over the internet, like, oh, 5.56 AKs, the mags are impossible to get, and compatibility. At least for the Beryl, these work just fine. I really can't say enough positive things about these. These are great mags. If you have a 5.56 AK, I would definitely recommend you try them and see if they work. And again, with the Beryl, there should be no issues. And with that, that is all I have for you today, friends. Thank you for watching. I'm going to be back with more AK content, more archery content, and I will eventually get the Halo 4 video out. I apologize, but I've been traveling for work a bunch and then haven't been feeling great, as you can probably tell from my voice. But again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.